the meeting. Yeah, so I was just keen to see whether this, whether the proposed motion affected any of the substantive motions, which we're in the middle of debating. I don't believe it does. I think we can consider it at the end. So we're still debating the recommendations that are in the paper, which are on page 6, A through D, D having 4 parts. It's pretty clear what we're debating. We're not debating what's on the screen. That will be dealt with afterwards. Okay, so do I have any further debate on the motions that have been moved and seconded from page 6 of the agenda? Any further debate on those? Councillor Pravanov.
So just a point of clarification, if we vote on point B, that actually gazumps what's on the screen. Is that correct?
I don't believe it does.
Okay,
no.
Thank
you. We might need to, yeah, I don't believe it does. So we're debating A through D. Right of reply, Councillor Handford.
Yeah, just to say another massive thank you, really, and also to reflect on the fact that our district-wide emissions are the largest contributor to our footprint, and the fact that, yeah, anything we can do to design our places and spaces to be safer for those walking, cycling, and yeah, I know my brother's not going to like me because he's got a fast car, and he really, when I talked to him about the speed management plan, he was not a huge fan, but I think this is what, although people might not know that they need it or they want it, I think in the long term, once the change beds in, it'll just become our new normal. So sorry, Arlo, but yeah, I'm a big fan.
I'm sure Arlo will forgive you, yeah. Councillor Handford. So I'll put those motions now. Everyone in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. Do you want a division? No. No? Okay, that's carried. So now we move to the additional recommendation. We'll put that up on the screen. Okay, that the location and need for the 2 raised threshold treatments near Kapakapanui School are revisited before the final sign-off of this specific area of the speed management plan. Do I have a mover for that motion? Councillor Pravanov, you wanted to move that. I understand Councillor Cooper was going to second. Right of introduction.
you, Madam Chair. I'm referring to the map on page 63 here. So what the current situation is that you have a raised hump directly outside the Waikanae swimming pool that is going to be removed and replaced with a raised a zebra crossing with a raised safety platform. What this plan is proposing, which is way outside the 100 metre school buffer, is to include 2 extra raised treatment structures, which are probably half a kilometre either side of that. And to me, that they're not necessary, or potentially not necessary, and they also have the impact of directing traffic down other roads, and particularly Te Moana Road, where there are already, you already heard around this council table of major concerns of large vehicles and speed on that stretch of road. So this is why I feel that because there's been no traffic management modelling and no, I suppose, look at the impacts of putting these in here, that we need to look at whether they're actually needed and whether they're in the right place if they are needed. Thank you.
Any further debate? Councillor Wilson.
Just to say, I'm not a traffic engineer, so I don't have an opinion about this, so I'd leave it to the traffic engineers. I would not have been in favour of this if it was instructive, but it just seems to be that you're going to have a look at it, right? So I've got no problem with it.
So I'll go next. I think it would be quite obstructive because we're trying to sign off a speed management plan today, and if we start second guessing parts of it that we haven't given staff notice of prior to today, we don't know what the problems with that would be. I would presume that staff wouldn't consider something in terms of traffic management that would be inappropriate. And part of what we're doing today is communicating that we trust the work that's happened and we're willing to sign off on this management plan today. So I won't be supporting this. Councillor Cooper.
Yes, I don't know this area particularly well. I know it, but not well enough to make comment really. My reason for supporting Jocelyn is that I think at times, my phone's going loopy. Excuse me. Sorry, I threw it in the garden. Is that we have ward councillors for a reason, and that they know their community and they know their ward. And I think Jocelyn knows the ward and the area and the people that she's supporting and here for. So on that basis, I'll be supporting Jocelyn based on that she is the ward councillor, and I think sometimes we just need to trust our ward councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Right of reply. Okay, so I'll put, oh, okay, right of reply? Yep, okay. So I'll now put that to the vote. All in favour, please say aye. Against? No. So we're calling for a division. All in favour, please raise your hands.
Pravanov. Thanks.
Against?
Henford. Halliday. Kay. Warwick. Spears. Wilson.
Kirby. Against. Councillor Kirby's against.
Thanks.
I've just taken a note of those names and they'll be published in the agenda. Okay, congratulations on the work that's happened. Yeah, look forward to making our roads safer for everyone. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you very much.
Sean. Also, thanks to everyone in the community who made submissions. The man hours that have gone into them would amount to years of work. So we're on to item number 10.2, adoption of new code of conduct, 2022 to 2025 Triennium. I welcome Sarah Watty to the table. Commencing on page 82. Okay, this. Great. So, Steffi, are you going to introduce this today?
Yeah.
Let's have a bit of focus around the table, please.
Kia ora koutou. I'm here to introduce the report on the adoption of the new code of conduct for this triennium. I just wanted to point out that we're seeking a resolution from you. We've made a recommendation that you adopt the new code of conduct that we've provided you, and this would then supersede the current existing code of conduct. So you already are bound by code of conduct. This would then just give you a new code of conduct that you've had input in to date. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, though.
So the short version is we still just have to behave ourselves and be nice to each other and staff. How about we just pass that today? So Sarah Watty's here to answer any questions that elected members might have. Councillor Wilson.
Will this make it easier to control Kathy's behaviour? No.
We'll just take that as a statement.
Sorry, yeah. Did you want to steer on page 82 about and we've got an and or, there's a couple of and ors, but in C, suddenly it's disappeared on me.
Here we go.
All right. Yeah, okay. So on page 82, see that the council will adopt the recommendations from independent investigators, that investigators are binding, blah, 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 or that council recommendations are not binding on council. So do you want to well, obviously we have to vote on that, but has there been some discussion around that? Do you think there's any consensus around that at this stage?
So there are some recommendations around those within the paper. Potentially you can take us through those, Sarah.
So we've deliberately put an option and or, as you've highlighted. So you have, we're asking for a decision on whether they are binding or not binding. And there's some detail in the report around that. In the previous workshop around the Code of Conduct, there was a discussion around this. One of the key points raised by councillors was the risk of these potential Code of Conduct investigations being politicised. That was one of the concerns with investigator recommendations being binding. On the contrary, there's a risk that if investigator recommendations aren't binding, that the ultimate outcome is, can be influenced by councillors, may not be an independent decision ultimately if councillors are free to amend the recommendations of councillors. Staff view is that if you adopt the new Code of Conduct complaints resolution process, then the risk of binding investigator recommendations is lessened. The reason for that is that the resolution process allows for a triaged approach. So complaints that are made that are trivial or vexatious or that are not valid can be dismissed by an initial assessor. So it's only those complaints that warrant an investigation that are likely to be referred to an investigator, and arguably there's an interest that those investigator recommendations that are then made are the recommendations that are adopted by council to avoid the risk of politicisation. So ultimately it's a decision for you. If the investigator recommendations are binding, you won't be able to amend the investigator recommendations, so there won't be a discretion if you feel that what the investigator has recommended is not right. That being said, investigators are appointed because they have qualifications and expertise in this area. So it's all considerations for you to take into account in your decision.
Thank you. Any further questions on that, Councillor Wilson?
No, but I'll raise it under debate.
Yeah, so...
Have a view.
Yeah, or you might want to move one or the other. Councillor Halliday?
Through you, Madam Chair. Just first, got a few things here, but first one is, will we be taking these recommendations individually?
Yes, we can. And in fact, if you request it, we have to.
Sorry?
If you request it, we have to.
Well, I'm just thinking they're the sort of ones that sort of almost need an individual decision. There's an A and a B, if you like, on the last two.
Happy to do them individually.
Okay, so bear with me a little bit here. One of the things I'm concerned about, I think it's page 104. Generally, it talks about if we have a code of conduct that we will be talking about that pretty much will be discussed in the public arena, not in public excluded, as such. And I'm just a little bit concerned from the perspective of respecting members' privacy, which is stated in here, that we're being hung out to dry, potentially. And the reason I say that is, for want of a better way of putting it, shit sticks. And so if a complaint is made and it's not agreed that the complaint was valid, if it's been in the public arena, then when it comes to election times, I guarantee you that's thrown back in somebody's face. Now, I've got no problems at all at the end of the process, it being released from public excluded into, once a decision's been made, and we've gone through the process. But I do wonder it being sort of, and I know there's a certain element of openness and transparency, but I think in this particular situation, as long as the end result does come out, the openness and transparency can actually be quite detrimental to individuals, especially until guilt is proven, because in theory we're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty.
Do you have a comment around that, Sarah?
Yes. The complaints process that is set out in the revised Code of Conduct does allow for certain complaints to be withheld. So for consideration of those complaints by council to happen in a public excluded setting. The grounds for that are the same grounds that would apply for any public excluded matter. So privacy would be one reason why it could be considered that a complaint wasn't appropriate to be discussed in public. There might be some complaints that where it's appropriate for that discussion to be held in a public arena if it was already public, for example, or if potentially complaints that weren't serious, but something that was private, commercially sensitive, confidential, for whatever reason. My expectation would be that would likely happen in a public excluded setting, and certainly consideration would be given and need to be given to whether that should happen.
Cool. And who would make that call? That'd be the assessor.
Yeah, so it would be if at the initial assessor stage, consideration is given. So the initial assessor determines whether what happens with the complaints. The complaint could be dismissed at that point and not need to be considered by council. If there was to be an investigation and recommendations were to be made, at that point that would need to come to council, and consideration would be given by the investigator and I would say mayor or chief executive, depending on who is involved. And the nature of the complaint to whether that should be in the public or public excluded setting.
Okay, right, lovely. Okay, no, I'm cool with that. Number 2, page 105. I'm just going to use it as an example. Bear with me a little bit. There's a word that's been used here, Māori word. I can't even pronounce it properly. Kunitera. Kunihira, is that the one? And it's in relation to, I've noticed it being used almost as a replacement for council, KCDC, or senior leadership team. And I'm just wondering, because of the style of this document, being a legal document, whether there needs to be a clearer, one, there's nothing in this paper that actually says what that word means. So it'd be quite nice. And is the word definitive? And what I mean by, or does that matter? What I mean by is in a legal context, the wording can be very, very, very important, especially if it can have multiple meanings as such. And I use the example on page 105, where we're talking to selecting an initial assessor. It says the external appointee on a I can't pronounce, Kunihira Audit and Risk Committee. Then you come down at the beginning of each trial, and the chief executive, in consultation with the Kunihira, it almost seemed like one was maybe the senior leadership team, maybe one was KCDC, maybe one was elected officials. Just wondering about that.
So I'll just answer just part of that question. In that we could look at defining that at the start of the Code of Conduct so that it's clear. I mean, I think that would be a very minor amendment that would be easy to make and would be helpful if it isn't already defined, and I don't believe it is. I won't profess to be an expert around te reo, so...
Look, neither am I.
Darren or Hara,
I'm not
or would anybody like to speak to the meaning of Kunihira?
I can make a comment as to how we use it in the local government sense with reference to Konihira Council, Kai Konihira Councilor.
There you go.
I think maybe another point there is that we are using it in this context instead of using the word council. The word council, when used in different contexts, and with other information wrapped around it can mean different things. So council can mean you guys, council can mean the organisation, and it's the wording around it and the way that it is used that helps people understand which version of council we are talking about. And my read of this is that the same is true for when konihira is used. It is the wording around it that helps people understand whether they're referring to the elected body or the organisation.
Yeah, I'd appreciate some clarity or just some definition in the document, if that's all right. I get that, that's no troubles at all, if possible. A third point was on 110. Actually, easier to do the manual way. It says the role of the ombudsman here in the third paragraph. It actually contradicts itself. I couldn't quite. It says in one instance that the auditor said the complaint is sustained. The ombudsman may recommend that it takes whatever action can be. But it says that, however, it's not binding. Then it says recommendation of the local authority under this act will, in general, become binding, unless the local authority resolves otherwise. It's either one or the other, I would have thought.
I think the wording of that sentence is a bit clumsy, so we could cross out become, and we could say recommendations made to the local authority under this act will not be binding unless the local authority resolves otherwise, so that it's expressed that.
Lovely.
Because the recommendations are never binding, it is up to you to resolve to accept those.
Oh, okay, all right. Oh no, that's respecting me. That's me. Lovely, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Halliday. Councillor Cooper.
Just a couple of questions. I concur with that last discussion around inserting te reo Māori words into English legal documents. I think we had that many years ago, and it's still causing friction across our beautiful country. I don't know why we just can't have the English word. I think would make a lot more sense. But my question is, in selecting an assessor, and I trust the Chief Executive to make a good decision because he's a good man, but is there the potential, if we're selecting retired local authority politicians, such as previous mayors or previous political people for that initial assessor role, although they might have the local governance experience, they may be coloured by their association to the organisation, and it's not a matter of not trusting the boss, because I do, but he may not necessarily be aware of those connections. Is there a risk of, can the person who's subject to the code of conduct object to the initial assessor and ask for another one to be appointed?
To the last question, I mean that would always be open to the complainant or a person subject to a complaint to object to a person appointed and raise that, and then consideration would be given as to whether the grounds for objecting were valid or not.
Okay, so that's it would be discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I thought that would be the case. If someone is invited to resign, and I think I know the answer, but we can't be made to resign. Under what circumstances could we be kicked out under this code of conduct?
Correct, unless
We
you
can't.
became ineligible, and that would be the only yeah. Yes, yeah.
Great. Yep. No, this is a good comprehensive document. So
Yeah, it's pretty good.
yeah, that's good. Yep.
Councillor Pravanov, and then Councillor Kirby.
yeah.
Sorry, Lawrence.
Thank you through the chair. So I also had some questions around selecting the initial assessor and the independent investigator. So based on the first question, under the heading, this is on page 17, under the heading it's got here, under the heading of selecting an independent investigator, the second paragraph says at the beginning of each training, the Chief Executive, in consultation with the Kunihira. So it would be, seeing that we are making a decision on this today, it would be really good to understand whether that is actually council staff or councillors. Who does that actually mean today?
Is your question who is on the panel?
What
Or
it says, it says in consultation with the Kunihira. So I just understanding whether that's council staff or councillors.
yeah, so it's councillors in this
Okay.
context.
Okay, thank you. So then, the paragraph above, selecting an initial assessor, it talks about various staff members or chief executives and politicians. And then it's got a member of the public with relevant experience and competency. And I suppose it wraps up to do with the other examples, is that what type of experience and competency do they need to have that these politicians also have? So what I'm trying to tease out here is being a politician doesn't necessarily mean to say you are good at investigating a complaint. And so as a member of the public does a member of the public need to have those skills to assess a complaint in a good manner?
So there is some I believe it's in the guidance that accompanies the code of conduct around what sort of experience would be helpful to somebody that was appointed as an investigator. They're things like experience in conducting investigations. It would be in this context, knowledge of local government. It could be relevant qualifications, but I'd suggest that that people that were investigating complaints could come from a range of different backgrounds, so that wouldn't be a mandatory criteria. So if this code is adopted, then consideration would be given to establishing a panel under the code per the wording, and we would need to develop some criteria that we would then use to determine who might be on that panel or who might be on that list. There's a bit of flexibility around what that looks like. It could be council's legal advisors, external legal advisors. In some circumstances, in other circumstances, that may not be appropriate. So I'd suggest that any list or any panel comprise a range of different types of investigators who have different types of experience. So you might want someone with dispute resolution, reconciliation experience, as well as having somebody with legal qualifications as another option.
Thank you for that. It's very good answer.
Excellent. Bede, you're all good? Lawrence. Sorry, Lawrence, I keep forgetting about you.
That's all right, I'm easy to forget. Good morning, everyone. Just a quick question in regards to the use of Konehira in this document. Could we please ensure that it's consistently used if we're going to use it and define it? Because there are moments in the document where we still use the word council. I think it would be wise for us, if it's possible, and this is the question, is it possible to ensure that if we use the Māori word, that it stays consistently through the whole document?
Yes, I think we've heard several different aspects relating to the use of the word Konehira today. So I think you can take it that if you are to adopt this code today, it would be subject to some final tweaks around the use of the word Konehira for consistency's sake, as you have identified.
So can we just note that, or do we need to embed that in the motions that we pass today?
Sarah, do you have a view on that?
We could include a recommendation that provides staff the ability to make minor amendments to wording that doesn't have any substantive impact on the code itself.
Great. So no, we're just still in questions. Do we have somebody who wants to move with one of? So we're going to do them one by one.
And I was
So
just
we've
going to
got.
going to suggest, Madam Chair, that we might want to do B and C before A. Because if we move A, then we've actually moved the document.
Computer's just died. So I'm just going to pull up the agenda. My screen's just died.
Oh, you've got it there? Yep.
Oh, great. No, I don't think that's necessary. I think that it just clarifies which parts of it we're going to select within that. So I'll look for a mover and a seconder for A. That just signals that we're going to adopt one today, I guess. So Councillor Wilson.
Yep.
Councillor Warwick. Right of introduction?
Well, just as obviously one of the most best behaved councillors, I'm happy to move this. It's unlikely to affect me at any stage. So no, that's cool. So so we're moving A at this stage?
Yes.
Yeah, done.
Okay, any debate? I put that to the vote. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? That's carried. So we've got B, council adopt a two-step complaints of alleged breaches assessment process.
Yes, move that.
That's been moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Warwick. Right of introduction, debate. I'll put that. Oh, hang on. Councillor Halliday wants to say something about that.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, through Madam Chair. Look, I'm surprised actually that we're being asked to, and this isn't debate, that we are being asked to adopt a two-step complaints process, which is great. I support that, but there was actually an option to not do that as well. It could have been a one-step complaints process. I was quite surprised to see that that wasn't an option, whether it would be the one-step or two-step, rather than being led into this two-step process as such. Other than that, so just please note that for future. I'm quite happy to support this moving forward.
Oh, so the message being that if there's a couple of options, that they're included with a note which one is recommended, I guess. But we'll talk about that when we set the agendas for our individual meetings, where that's appropriate or not. So that's been moved and seconded. I'll put that. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, that's carried. So C, we have two options. One is that the recommendations from the independent investigator is binding, and the other is that it's not binding, and that it comes back to council for decision. Which one of those would you want to move?
I'd like to move or that council adopt the recommendations from independent investigators are not binding on council in the resolution of a code of conduct complaint.
Seconded by Councillor Halliday. Right of introduction.
Right. Well, given that the findings of the ombudsman would not be binding, I think it would be a little bit precipitous of us to assume that it should be binding from an investigator. Ultimately, it is a political process, and so obviously any recommendation from an investigator would be taken seriously. But ultimately, the decision is made by council, and so I think the council should have the final say on whether or not, so a binding result. Things might change in the interim. There's all sorts of reasons why ultimately council should take responsibility for a decision.
Thank you. I think I'm inclined to agree that part of the kind of principle around this is that we hold each other to account a little bit. You know, that we have joint expectations of how we're going to operate as a council, and I think that option is consistent with that. Councillor Halliday?
And I had the same point down, to be honest, just for consistency. I know that there's an argument with regards to the theory that this process could be weaponised with regards to a divisive council, but my personal view is if it got to that stage, we've got bigger problems than this, as such. And I hope it wouldn't go down that pathway, but hopefully we'll see how that goes, but I'm quite happy to support this as we move forward.
Right of reply?
No, but just a procedural thing. I guess if anybody wanted to move the not or part, would they be able to do that?
So I think
I don't think
clear
they
that
do.
we've deleted everything up
Yeah.
until or,
Okay.
and that's what we've moved and seconded. I think that's clear. So
So
just
no-
to be clear, what we're moving is that council adopt that recommendations from independent investigators are not binding on council on the resolution of code of conduct complaint. That's what's been moved and seconded. Okay, I'll put that to the vote. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. And we have one additional recommendation, which I'll move from the chair, that council approves that council approves staff to make any minor editorial changes for clarity. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hanford. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you. It's died. It's a pain. It should have. Hang on, I'll just check that it's.
Power's there. Yeah, swap you for a minute.
It had quite a lot. I think it had quite a lot of battery left in it too. So we're moving on to the much anticipated item, Waikanae Library and Service Centre Summary of Community Engagement.
So would you like me to move something?
No, we'll just have staff introduce the
Oh,
paper
cool.
first and then we'll have questions.
Cool. Let's do that. I'm just
Behave
keen.
yourself, Councillor Wilson.
Oh, code of conduct.
Tracy, would you like to join the table as the Te Atiawa representative? Tracy Morgan is joining the table, Deputy Chair of Te Atiawa. Right, I'll invite council staff to introduce this paper.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, just to quickly rewind, councillors, back in April, we did brief you on a proposed approach for engaging with the community on the Waikanae Library, and later that month in May, you resolved to engage the community on 3 options, which we duly did. You also resolved to get us to report back to you, which we are now doing. We had a further workshop with you 2 weeks ago, where a desire was expressed for us to have a think about a couple of things. One was the potential for us to go up on those sites, and the second was the what we call option 4, the option that Te Atiawa introduced during the process. So that is reflected in the report that's in front of you. I'll take the report as read. I just wanted to say that whatever we do now is there's a trade-off in time. Time is the major factor here. Whatever decision you take, there will be an impact on when stuff gets done. So it seems to me that that's the major trade-off that's going to need to be made around the library. But I didn't want to see anything more than that, Madam Mayor. I'm aware that there's an amendment proposed, but I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you very much for that introduction, and I'd like to acknowledge the huge amount of work that's gone into this as well, and congratulate the team for the response to the community engagement that we've had, which has been substantial and very meaningful as well, and very well summarised in the papers today. So if you could accept those congratulations and also pass them on to the rest of the team, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah.
So I'll now invite questions on the paper. Councillor Coe.
Yes, thank you for this paper. I just would like to confirm whether proceeding with option 1 in any way precludes us further moving on to option 3 if we so desire. is there a conflict between option 1 and option 3? So if we start now, because there is urgency around getting a library up and running, so would that preclude any or result in any additional cost if we then decided to proceed with option 3?
No, in fact, you could see option 1 as stage 1 of stage of option 3 if you wanted to. So the short answer is no.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's really good to have that clarification. Councillor Halliday.
Through you, Madam Chair, just really following on from Councillor Coe, with regards to option 1, if that is looked at in a similar sort of vein that Councillor Coe is talking about precluding moving forward in option 3, it was talked to actually looking at a wider scope with regards to the potential of what could happen in Mahara Place. Would it be a fair assumption that that wouldn't be an issue either, that we would still be able to be looking at options for Mahara Place in general, rather than waiting until October to come back with that information?
In general, that's fair, but no matter what decision is taken, that will constrain whatever is going to happen in the long term for Mahara Place, right? So there's no perfect option here.
No, I appreciate that.
But in general, that assessment is fine.
I guess what I'm saying is if option 1 is decided on today, as I'm aware of the motion that's being, the alternative motion that's being put forward, it doesn't stop us, or won't stop us, looking at the larger picture of that town centre, if you like, and how that's all going to work as such.
Not at all, but of course it might shape the future of the town centre.
No troubles at all. Lovely. Thank you very much.
Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you through the chair. So you've mentioned today, and it's also written in this report about option 4. I just want to consider, and so this has come up at the very end, I just wanted to consider whether this option was considered by the working party and by the advisory group that did a probably maybe 2 years worth of work before the 3 options were finalised on, whether that was one of the options that was discounted.
So the working group started, I think, with 11 options, including going across into Elizabeth Street. This was one of the options that was in there, in that wide basket that we started off with, but it dropped out when we came down to the 3 when we workshopped here back in May.
Thank you.
So I'd like to invite Tracy Morgan to say something, because just to introduce and clarify the bit of the report that talks about option 4, we'll call it. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou e te whare, ko Tracy Morgan ahau, ko te Atiawa te iwi me Ngāti Toa Rangatira, no Waikanae toku kāinga, whakatipuranga, ki whakarungatai te marae. I have lived in Waikanae my whole life, along with my parents who lived there, my grandmother and great-grandmother. So before a recommendation is put forward, Mana Whenua asks councillors to consider the following. The Waikanae Township has immense spiritual and cultural importance as the whenua in which iwi hapu whānau have their roots, tribal interests and association. Buildings are not just physical spaces where people congregate, but they are an expression and extension of identity. Give the library hub its own space and allow it to stand away from the gallery and supermarket with its own authority and mana. Iwi have been here for many generations and we will continue to be here as kaitiaki. Therefore, we do not believe a short-term, quick turnaround solution is an option. We believe every consideration should be given to a more future-focused model that will sustain our community for many generations, and we look to our rangatahi and the tamariki yet to come to inform us into the future. The current temporary library site, including other current buildings owned by council, would allow for the following. It would better support the revitalisation of the town centre and commercial development of Mahara Place as an anchor point, centred within the township. It is better situated to encourage visitors into and down through Mahara Place, to revitalise the shopping centre and to support small local businesses. It is better positioned to open out and into Mahara Place and has a stronger profile and prominence within Mahara Place. It has a stronger frontage with the provision of entry and exits on not only eastern, western, but also southern sides of the building due to its position. It is more easily accessible for our elderly and disabled community with car parking at the rear of the building, including large open spaces from 3 sides of the building for walking, cycling and driving. It provides the best vantage point from mountains to sea and is positioned well for natural sunlight from the west to enter the building. It would balance the cultural thread and anchor more evenly across the township, beyond with better connections to the gallery and marae, therefore increasing the mauri of our town centre. It could be staged to extend in the future. Recent community engagement showed a 50-50 split, with option 1 driven by mostly older people, with younger people actually selecting option 3 as their first choice because they were wanting a more future-proofed library which could grow and evolve alongside of the community. Option 1 would see 3 significant buildings being Mahara Gallery, the supermarket and potential library hub bottlenecked together. Give the library its own space and allow it to stand away from the gallery and the supermarket with its own authority and mana. We believe every consideration should be given to a more future-focused model that will sustain our community for many generations, and we look to our rangatahi and our children that are yet to come to inform us and into the future. Option 4 was one of 3 options put forward as mana whenua through Atiawa Ki Whakarungatai Charitable Trust. It fell off the table and it wasn't considered when the 3 options were put to the community. It fell off the table through people coming and going through council. And so, yes, it's been placed on the table again as an option. In fact, it's actually an option, it's a variation of options 2 and 3. So it's not a new option, it's literally a variation of options 2 and 3. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Tracy. Do I have any other questions on the report before I move to recommendations? Richard Mansell.
Good morning. I've got a few. First of all, Mike, you said just before that 2 weeks ago in a workshop, council gave you a steer. Was there in fact a workshop, or was it just an informal discussion because not enough councillors attended?
It was a briefing, and I took from the briefing that an expressed desire.
Okay, that's not the position I thought the meeting held, but that's okay. You then said in point 48 that the council have indicated, and I assume that's where you got your steer from the meeting that I didn't think was a meeting, that the mayor just asked if we actually needed to hold it because there were 5 people missing. Is that the meeting that you're talking about?
Well, yes, so part of my job is to
interpret?
Is to use political nous and to reflect that in the advice I give to you. So that's where that comes from, Richard.
Okay. We've heard that Te Areawa were part of, the proposal was included. Were they included in the library steering group and or the Waikanae Library Focus Group? Because, yeah, just a yes or no, I guess.
Well, short answer is yes, Richard. We've had a close relationship with Te Areawa throughout.
And just the reasons why it dropped out, are you aware of that, or are you able to recall why it dropped out?
Yes, I can. So when we workshopped back and we had the briefing back in May, we focused on those 3 options that we ended up selecting. And if you recall the process, it was I don't know if you recall, but it was my advice, kind of that they might be 3 sensible options to run with. At that time, whilst we had Te Areawa in the room, we hadn't actually had good enough period to chew on the advice they had provided us. If we had our time again, we might have done something different, Richard.
Okay. Option 4, Te Areawa's option 4, relies on purchasing adjacent properties. Have you approached the owners of those adjacent properties to see whether they're interested in selling?
Yes. In one case, but I don't want to discuss that too much publicly because of the commercial aspects of those discussions, Richard.
Can we assume that they weren't prepared to sell because the option was taken off the table?
I think you've heard that there's commercial sensitivity around discussing those properties, so I won't take any further questions on that. Thank you.
Okay. I assume that would include discussion on Public Works Act and the difficulty of taking properties under Public Works Act? Okay. I just wondered if Ian could comment on the provision of library services at the moment, whether he considers what we have in the temporary space a library.
Would I consider it a library? Yes, I probably would consider it a library. In terms of the space size, the adequate amount of space, is that the question?
Yes, basically, and the services that a modern library, and we hear a lot about a modern library, the services that a modern library would provide, is that being catered for in the
So certainly
current
the space at the moment, and I think most of the community would agree, is not adequate. So there is certainly a need for additional space. And obviously option one, whatever option is on the table, will start to provide that. The question then becomes if you're looking for space that meets a current need versus space that will be suitable in the future.
Thank you. I'll just note that we were told, I was going to ask Chris Praven a question, but she's left the room. There she is. I just wonder, you were told us in a separate council briefing recently that the council is obliged under legislation to provide library services. Would you like to confirm that and just comment on that?
I can confirm that. So it is under the Local Government Act. Provision of library services is listed as a function/role of council.
Thank you. And just lastly, what's the timing likely to be if we do more investigation and discover or decide on an option that doesn't involve option one, and whether the long-term plan comes into play for anything other than option one?
So options 2 and 3 both required us consulting through that LTP because there's more funding required. So if we run with the recommendations as put, reporting back to you in October shouldn't be an issue. And in terms of the overall project plan, we're talking about a couple of months, we think, in terms of the overall ability to get something constructed. So at this stage, we don't have any great concerns about that, Richard, but it's because of the timing. But if we were to kind of push it out extensively beyond October, it may start to become an issue with the pushing up against the LTP.
So are you saying that we're in a use it or lose it situation with option one? Unless we make a start and get the work going, we run into the long-term plan, and then councillors will get to have a say again about whether the Waikanae Library is more important than the Paraparam Sports Facility, or the Otaki Library, or Paikakariki Sewerage, or...
No, I'm not saying that. I think those priorities are a question for this table. I think there is 13.8 million in the current LTP, and as far as we're concerned, that is earmarked for the Waikanae Library.
So that will survive any long-term plan?
I can't guarantee that. That's for this table, but I would have thought it would be okay.
Well, I don't know about that. Okay, that's it. I'll let you go now. Thank you.
Councillor Pravanov.
Yeah, thank you. So I've got a couple more questions. In relation to option 4, there's been a number of, well, in fact, there's been quite a lot of discussion about it over the last couple of months, or couple of weeks. There is nothing in this paper that actually talks about the timeline that it potentially would take, which I think is important for us to know when we're making this decision, particularly given the location that is being considered. Are you able to provide some timelines in terms of being able to start building option 4?
No, so that's why we've recommended that we come back to you in October to give us some time to work up that advice for you, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. So my second question relates to, I suppose, the word further analysis. Normally, in these types of situations, we are aware of the scope of what that a further analysis is. In this situation, we don't. And so what we are being asked to make a decision on here is an analysis that we don't actually know what it entails. And that is because, well, I suppose what's fair to say is these have come from a briefing where the Mayor very clearly stated that no steers would be taken.
So for option, there's two parts to this. First is option 4. So our view is that we would run that through the similar analysis that we did for options 1, 2 and 3, obviously without the community engagement. And for the construction of apartments or whatever on top of the building, we would seek some specialised commercial and structural advice around that, which in fact I think we've already started.
So if, for argument's sake, option 4 was decided to be the front runner, because it hasn't been consulted on previously, would more consultation be required because it's completely different from what has already been considered, being put out to the communities now?
So we would need to come back to you with further advice on that in October. That's why we've given ourselves some time to actually give you that advice.
Okay, thank you.
Great, I'm not seeing any more lights on. So I have been advised prior that there are some alternative recommendations to the ones in the paper that Councillor Wilson would like to put forward. Can I have those up on the screen, please? Are we ready for it? Matching screen. There it is. Ta-da. Great. So I'm just going to ask for a mover and a seconder for these so that we can debate them. I won't do any messy questioning around or anything like that. So do I have a seconder? I'll second it. Councillor Provanov. Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Provanov. So they've all been moved and seconded. I think it's pretty clear what they all mean. So actually, what I might do is put A, B and C to the vote. So we've covered them off because they'll happen no matter what. So we're now voting, moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Provanov on A, B and C. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, that's carried. We now move on to D, which is where it differs from the recommendations in the paper. So, right of introduction, Councillor Wilson.
Okay. So we're assuming now that this alternative motion has become the substantive motion? Yep. Okay.
Yeah, this is what's moved and seconded, and we're debating.
Okay. So, first of all, I just wanted to acknowledge the work of Mike and Peter and Ian and Philippa and their whole team in putting together this. It's been quite an exhaustive consultation, and it's been superb consultation, actually, I have to say. It's, the feedback from the public has been huge and the input's been really valuable. Just to say that adopting option 1, I am completely convinced, and I've been led to that, that this does not preclude other options from being incorporated. I would like to think that what this does do is it allows ongoing conversations with Te Atiawa, on ongoing conversations generally about how this might expand. But what this does do is it kicks it off. This council is fast earning a reputation for how we consult, consider, decide, and then act. And this is an opportunity for us to do that.
Thank you. Who's next? Councillor Coe.
Yes, look, I would support that motion. However, I do feel it requires adding to, and because I think it's unclear as to what the next step would be should we go down this path. And I would like to propose that we add E, which is that option 3 be considered in terms of affordability and relative priority as part of the long-term plan process. Because I think that gives us then a clear steer forward.
Okay, so that's a heads up that you'll move that motion should this be carried. So,
Yes.
so we'll address that at that time.
Yes.
Okay, so is anything further to add?
No.
Well, yeah, we'll cover that off if this gets adopted.
Mhm.
Yeah. Councillor Hanford.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, good. Yeah, I completely agree with what Councillor Coe has just said. I'm happy to support this, but I would have been even more comfortable if it said that we're taking option 1 very much as a phased approach to looking at the longer term needs and aspirations of both the Waikanae community, mana whenua, rangatahi across our district. I kind of feel a little bit uncomfortable around the wording being just all go and not necessarily having much regard for the future state of the potential for the hub. So I would be more comfortable seeing us look at the bigger picture and then adopting option 1 as an initial phase to that bigger picture instead of just not adopting option 1 as go right now, as much as I appreciate the need to progress, which is why I'm happy to support it. But I definitely agree with Councillor Coe around needing to have something in there that looks at this only being a phase to either option 1 or option 3, or option 4, and making sure that option 4 stays at least in the midst of those long-term plan conversations as well.
Councillor Cooper.
Yes, I agree with Nigel's sentiments around the engagement with the community in the process. I think it's been outstanding, and what I'm hearing back from the community is that they were very satisfied with the process, and I think it's a step change for this council to put some of the projects in the past that weren't consulted well, and I think this is almost a perfect model for moving forward. It was very well done. And I think with the 50% of the feedback from the community that wanted option 1, a lot of those comments and concerns on my reading from that feedback from the community was the fiscal responsibility, as well as having something that was fit for purpose. And I think it's incumbent on this council to have fiscal responsibility. If we just read the news with China, the pre-fu coming up pre-election, our country is needing to come into a time of fiscal prudence, as this council does. It's been signalled by the CE that the LTP will be constrained due to some of those pressures. So I fully support option 1. It gives Waikanae what they rightfully deserve, which is a nice library and a space that hopefully they can be extremely proud of for many years to come. So, yeah, definitely option 1. Thank you.
Councillor Kirby.
Kia ora, thank you. I'm happy to support this motion. But I do want to note that I think there is a need for some sort of a plan around the whole of the Mahara Place area. One of the things that came across pretty clearly through the consultation that we've been doing around Vision Kapiti, a number of people that I've spoken to in the street there talk about revitalising and getting people back into that space. And so I think getting something around the library will be a start, but I think there needs to be a bigger conversation around how we can improve and revitalise that whole area for the good of the community and our future generations. So that includes talking about how we connect better to the railway station, the Memorial Hall, how we get better transit across the railway line, including another crossing at some point. So yeah, this would be a good start to the process, but I think we need to indicate that further work needs to be done around those conversations for the future of Waikanae.
Thank you, Councillor Kirby. Councillor Spires, seeing as you haven't spoken yet.
Thank you. While I support this recommendation, I do not want to lose, just for clarification, I don't want to lose these last three recommendations that we're also going to go through, noting the addition of option 4 for further analysis. So that's going to remain a recommendation as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's being proposed as part of the further motion that Councillor Coe has suggested.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, option 3 was suggested, but I didn't hear option 4. That was all.
Yeah, we'll note that, and we'll once we discuss the further recommendation, we'll cover that off.
Okay, cool.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Mr. Mansell?
You probably already know my opinion because I made it quite clear, and I make no apologies for that. But I see option 1 as actually stage 1. It's not either or. It's let's just do this first while we work on other options. And as I said at the meeting, that I thought option 4 was fantastic. It considered so many more things, but the people of Waikanae actually want to get on and do something. Everyone talks about 50% agreed on option 1. Actually, 100% agreed on option 1, because you could only do options 2 and 3 if you had done option 1 first. So if you've got 100% of people agreeing with you, you'd be a pretty brave council to go against that. I'll just note that the library closed in November 2018. That's almost 5 years ago. We've had a facility that is pretty inadequate, and as recently as last year, when we gained some more space back in that building, we didn't put any more library services in there. We put a service centre in there. I'd also point out that this is funded already through the long-term plan, and rates are being collected on it already. So you're taking money which may be in false pretences. I'd like to also point out that the elderly are high users of libraries, so their engagement and high-level engagement should not be dismissed so quickly. 35% of Waikanae are over the age of 65 and obviously need to be provided for in a different way than any other of the demographics in the community. So I would strongly support option 1, and I would also equally support the indicated additional motion that Councillor Coe mentioned of investigating. But I think for the people of Waikanae, we actually want something done now, not in a few years' time. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Halliday.
Through the chair, pretty much with everything. I mean, I support this motion. Everything that needs to be said has been pretty much all been said. I just wanted to note that in the perfect world, we can have whatever we want, but that's not the case. Waikanae, fantastic place, but our central library for our district is actually in Paraparumu. So do we need to have the absolute maximum that we can have, because there is a cost associated to it, a substantial cost. I think there's huge and exciting possibility in Mahara Place, the way it's set up at the moment, and I'd like us to get on exploring it rather than pretty much we're putting another building site in there that's going to be detrimental to the development of the heart of that area. We have Mahara Gallery opening up shortly. I personally believe that the whole Mahara area really is going to be the hub, not just one building. I think we've got potential there for that to happen. And that can be spread over multiple spaces, but from a library perspective and what we want to achieve and what we want to get moving, I think option one is a very, very good option because it's an asset we own, it's an asset we have, we've budgeted for it, and we can just get on with it as such. So I'll certainly be supporting it. But also Councillor Coe's motion with regards to, this is not the end with regards to how we're approaching that area. Quite frankly, it's almost the beginning because of the exciting potential I think that we have in there. We own other spaces in that area. We're being very proactive in how we approach these opportunities. I'm looking forward to see where we are in maybe 5 or 6 years' time. I don't think it'll just be one library that's been built in that space. I think there'll be all sorts of things that would have been done from a larger holistic approach. It includes a railway station, it includes the halls, it includes the connectivity, and includes tourism and destination plans that attract people to that area as well. It does all need to tie together. But one thing I just would note is that we do need to minimise, in my opinion, the impact of the build in that space. A lot of businesses have suffered quite a lot over the years. I don't want to see another 4 years of that sort of disruption. I think there'd be this is also the option that gives us a most minimal disruption in the short term or short to medium term that allows us to actually breathe some life back into Mahara Place, especially considering the investment we've put into Mahara Gallery and the fact that that opens in October. So we want to be enhancing those spaces as well. So I'll certainly be supporting this as we move forward, and I'll certainly be supporting Councillor Coe's addition as well.
Councillor Warwick.
I support it as well because the people have told us that's what they want, that's what they got the options of, and also if we then flip back, the community's going to go, well, you don't listen anyway, once again. But with Liz's additional recommendation, I think it needs to be worded that we're not just limiting ourselves to adding option 3 or 4, but that we are looking to the whole area and that those are options within a plan going forward. So we're not just limiting it to those 2 plans because there may be other things coming that will make be a better option.
I think if we just keep that additional motion as open as possible, it's going to really help if we could work on that, please, rather than limiting ourselves to options and processes. I know that Councillor Wilson sent through something about not precluding other options being explored. I wonder if we should go back to that as the additional motion. Can we just look at that? Could you send that through to Dem Services, please? Councillor Pravanov.
Yeah, thank you. So obviously I support this motion here, but I also support consideration of other options. So with option 1, that's actually refurbishing a library that, as Mr. Mansell said, was closed 5 years ago. Waikanae is an area that is going to have an awful lot of growth. It's going to have growth which basically is going to outgrow the library very quickly. Interestingly enough, with option 3, the young people, they proposed that option, which was really great because they're the ones who are going to inherit this work. In terms of people wanting to go to other libraries such as the one here, you know, we need to be very conscious of our effects on the environment, our climate change, and looking at 15-minute cities, and I think or walks. And so I think having something that is actually larger than what is actually there now is actually really important. So yes, so just in summary, very happy to support this motion here, which I've seconded, plus also to look at other options, particularly option 3. Thank you.
Great. Right of reply on this before we move on to any other motions.
Yeah, okay. So just to say, I'm a fan of option 3, but as people who know me well know that I'm a very pragmatic person. So getting this thing going and started is to me very important. It is actually stage 1. It's just that the other stages are going to require some serious money, and that's going to be a discussion for the LTP. So in terms of being too directive to staff, I think I would certainly support Liz's addition. Haven't actually seen it. I'm pretty sure it will be. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure it'll be along the lines of supporting investigation of how those other options might fit into the broader expanse of what we're trying to do here. But they will be very serious LTP considerations, whereas this isn't. It's done. So, and just on library, just very briefly on libraries themselves. Libraries, they're sort of the ultimate egalitarian enterprise. I think that libraries are accessible to everybody, regardless of how much money your parents have got, how much money you've got. You can get in and you can use our libraries. They are fantastic in terms of levelling out our society in general. And we also have a really superb library service in Kapiti. Actually, we are blessed to have what we have. We have a fantastic interloan service. And once Waikanae is back fully stocked, that will become a greater integral part of that as well. I've heard Ian's visions for what a library will look like. I would take issue with the idea that somehow we're going to outgrow this thing really quickly. I don't think we are. I think there's some future proofing, and I think option 1 will provide a lot of that. So yeah, so basically that's where we're at. I think this is fantastic, and I am seeing it as stage 1. As those of you who know me will know that I don't mind spending public money for public projects, but that will be a discussion in the LTP. What I would hate to do is put the brakes on, and then find out that we don't have the money for the LTP, and then here we are down the track and we've still done nothing. So this takes us forward. So just in terms of an E. Will yield to the chair on how she wants to proceed with that, but it does seem that there seems to be a general view that an E or another sentence on D would be that we consider that we can continue to consider how other options might work. Yeah, generally, and Mahara is.
Sorry, can we leave the other options and just focus on closing remarks in terms of progressing with option 1 at this time?
Right.
And then so that concludes the closing remarks, and then we'll deal with any other motions after that. So I'll now put that to a vote. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. So we'll now move on to the additional motion, which will hopefully allay some of Tracy's concerns in terms of option 4 being completely off the table, because that would be regrettable in my view. So we can't have a break. We're just going to have to box on, because David has to go at 12 and we've got Wellington Regional Leadership Committee who have to go at 1. So actually we'll get through the item on the audit, and then we'll take a short break after that, but it won't be a lunch break yet. Okay. So no, we're going to continue with this. We're going to get this over the line. So as long as we keep this motion nice and open, so I think it could be as simple as the adoption of option 1 does not preclude any other options being considered. Just as simple as that, and that leaves it open.
No, I disagree. I think we need We need
Okay,
to
well,
have
I'm going
a-
to leave this further item until after lunch then.
Yes.
And we will then we'll be able to get the wording all right and bring it back after lunch. So
Good
we'll
idea.
move on now to the audit paper, which is so we're moving now on to the audit proposal, which is 10.5 on page 322. Great. So we're on page 322, audit proposal for the 2023, 24 and 25 financial years. And we've got Jingzhu here and Cheryl, to present this paper. And I will note that we're moving on to this because we do have our esteemed chair of our Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee here, David Shand, for this report. And he has sat patiently all morning waiting for it. So that's why we rushed onto this, because I understand that David needs to be gone by 12. So we've got 20 minutes, but I don't think it'll take that long. Great. Over to you.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, David, being here. And so I'll take the report as read. There's a couple of things I want to mention from, we took the report to the Risk Assurance Committee on the 3rd of August committee meeting, and as being going through approved by the committee and now coming to the council is because of the delegation's policies. And a couple of things we added in the report is about the local government New Zealand conference in July. We took the remit around the audit fee, and we support the work that they calling on central government to take action on the reduced audit fees. It is interesting that actually this morning that there were lots of councils given a list of the council that their audit fee, and it has a comparison that there was only a dozen councils give respond. The audit fee to per population is range from $4.20 to $25. And it's interesting to see that, and we are sitting on $4.87. So we're actually not bad at all in terms of the audit fee. The increase, we still increase about 22% from the last audit, because they do audit every 3 years, and increase about 22%, which is taken off the inflation over the last 3 years. And they always set a fee for 3 years as well. 22%, and it's about $45,000 for the year one of the audit. And the increase a lot is driven by the water regulation change that we used to get external independent people to measure our performance. Now we do not have that because regulation changed in November 2022, which is the financial year just passed by, and we're doing the audit at the moment. And auditors now need to put extra effort to actually do the auditing around the performance measures. That's hence the increase of the fees. So and going through the recommendations that I would like this council to approve the fees and also the engagement letter. And note there's attachment for the report from our auditor, Jens Young, and the remit was calling for the audit fees for the central government. And I recommend the council delegates the CE to sign the proposal letter and the audit engagement letter as a contract. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, and thank you for introducing the recommendations. Much appreciated. David, thank you for coming today.
Well, thank you for your courtesy in in making the time change for me. I have sat here all morning in rapt interest, I might say, with great interest. So thank you very much. I just want to add two quick points. One is that this proposal is very late. The audit is already well underway and in fact is due to be completed in time for the meeting of the Risk and Assurance Committee in 3 weeks' time. So the fee is already in fact being incurred, and the reason for this delay I want to explain is entirely due to delays in the Auditor General's office. Very, very late getting to all councils with fee proposals. The Auditor General is reviewing his or her their own financial position and seeking to move to greater cost recovery. So that's the reason for the delay, but it has been very carefully looked at by the Risk and Assurance Committee, and before that, in fact, Jing and Mark and me and David Cochrane, the other independent member, separately went through these two documents very carefully. So we are satisfied with it, and we recommend it to your good consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you have something to say in response, or that's all good? Questions then, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, just in terms of the cost of this. So it's what 928 hours at about 250 grand, which is $270 an hour. Is that considered normal and reasonable? Yeah.
The hourly rate, I can't comment on that, how they actually calculate the hourly rate, because they also have audited.
They just think of a number and multiply it by 10.
Well, if you do the divisor of the total cost by the number of hours, that's what it comes out at, is $270 an hour. Just wondering if that's.
The fee comes from the Auditor General.
Sorry, we'll wait for the microphone because that's a useful clarification. So if you could press your button again, please, David, and say that again.
The fee comes from the Auditor General's office. They are the ones who, in fact, determine the fee for their agent, which is Ernst & Young, right?
A much more accurate representation than my previous rather flippant comment. Any other questions? Councillor Halliday.
Yes, I know Mr. Shan mentioned that the Auditor General Office is doing cost recovery around this. And I just wonder, is there any options for us to do cost recovery with regards to the other unfunded mandates and legislation that comes down the pipeline from central government? Actually, no, this is the wrong place to ask that question. I withdraw the question.
I don't think you're expected to answer that. But a very nice rhetorical question there. Any other questions before I ask for a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Halliday. Seconded by Councillor Wilson. Any debate? Right of introduction? Great. I'll say one thing, which is I think it's useful to point out that there was a remit to the local government AGM about auditing responsibilities and fees, which is well worth checking out. So it's a cross sector issue. So I'll put that to the vote. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you very much. And thank you for coming, David. We do have Kim here, who is here for the Wellington Regional Leadership Committee paper. I'm wondering if we can just carry on long enough to do that. We have had a briefing on that, so I don't think it's going to take too long. And if we could get through that, then I think we could have a clear head to then move on to then we can bring the other item back straight after lunch. Otherwise, we're bringing this back straight after lunch and then the other item. So I'm not seeing any particular riot from the table, so I'm going to invite Kim to come to the table, and we'll move on to item 10.8. Sorry, I'm having some serious technological challenges today, so I'm resorting to my piece of paper, and it's 10.8, Wellington Regional Leadership Committee updated agreement in terms of reference, and I believe we're also appointing somebody to do some work in this space as well. So, invite an introduction.
Sure. Yes, as discussed, the paper today provides an updated terms of reference for the Wellington Regional Leadership Committee. The reasons for making these amendments is largely to provide for the agreement of the future development strategy, which is a requirement under the government's National Policy Statement on Urban Development. Thank you. So many acronyms. The content of the paper, there are a bunch of attachments with that, which have all come through from Kim and her team. So if it's all right, I'll take the paper largely as read, and we can just answer questions as they come up.
Any questions? I'm not seeing any. So I'll just...
Sorry, Madam Chair.
Oh, no need to apologise. Councillor Halliday.
Oh, look, I just wanted to check. I'm actually okay with all this. No troubles at all. I was just wondering whether we needed to do I separately at all, which was the naming of a person to be. In other words, you can pass everything else, so it's all signed off. I don't know whether.
Well, we might be able to move it all just with a name in there.
Okay, that's
yeah.
good.
Let's see if we can do that. We'll separate them out if we need to. Thanks for the suggestion, and thanks for keeping an eye on that, Councillor Halliday. Much appreciated. So, we're moving to these recommendations with thanks to the committee and the staff. So we're noting that we established the Regional Leadership Committee. We're agreeing to continue as a joint committee, note the main amendments, and authorise the Wellington Regional Leadership Committee to appoint a joint committee subcommittee for the future development strategy. So it's quite an important step. We're approving a process going forward so that we can do some spatial planning for the region. And at I, we're appointing an elected member to be a member of the joint committee subcommittee. So I'm happy to move these from the chair with Councillor Wilson as our appointee on the committee. I've had a word with him and he's agreed. I hope he's not rescinding his acquiescence to that request. Do I have a seconder? Seconder, Councillor Warwick. Opening remarks. I think Councillor Wilson is a previous regional councillor, and with that regional perspective would be the ideal person to represent our council on that committee. And I think he brings a lot of relevant skills and expertise and experience. So, and he's willing to put in the time, which is I'm very grateful for. Councillor Wilson.
I have so much spare time. The reason I am prepared to put my hand up on this is actually really important, I think, and I think it's really important for Kapiti to be in the room and being part of this conversation. I think I can see Kapiti being the beneficiary of this work, and certainly we contribute plenty. So there's lots of opportunities here, and I think there are. You see regional policy statements, national policy statements, which are informing those, and those that are informing our local policy statements. So, if you look at a lot of the work that we're doing, there are regional implications of that, coastal hazard strategies and all sorts of things. So, yep, looks fantastic.
Great. Councillor Halliday?
I'm sorry, just one thing. Would you like an alternative in case because I am getting on a bit. Unable to make it for any reason.
No,
First runner up.
No, I think we won't do that right now. We'll bring a quick paper to appoint somebody else if we need to. Councillor Halliday.
Yeah, look, I just want to thank Councillor Wilson for putting his hand up. He brings a wealth of experience to that situation, and I think it's going to be important we have a strong voice, but a well-informed voice in that space. So thanks, Nigel. I think that's going to be a fantastic step. Also, I want to thank Kim for her work in this area. She's kept us informed, and I found your coming to the table, and council officers as well, has been very informative and made the process of getting an understanding of what's happening in space a lot easier to get the head around. As such, I do appreciate that. Thank you very much. Other than that, that's me. Looking forward to supporting this and looking forward to see where it all goes.
Great. I'll waive my right of reply, except to thank Kim and the team for the work that's gone into this. So I'll put that to the vote. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you for your time today. Okay, so we'll now break for lunch until, we'll take half an hour, so about 25 past we'll come back. Just bearing in mind we didn't have a proper morning tea break, so